Hey, welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and today I'll be featuring a tribute to my favorite radio station of all time, 92.7 WLIR. This is the station that took me as a young boy and built me into the music-loving man I am today. If you clicked on this because you remember and love WLIR, welcome to the channel, and please leave me a comment with your memories of the station. For anyone who's never heard of WLIR, don't worry. I'm going to be talking about all the music that made that station great. WLIR was a very small station out on Long Island in New York. The LIR in WLIR stood for Long Island Radio. The people that worked there used to joke it stood for low income radio because there was really very little money to go around. But the station did a lot with the little money they had. WLIR was the runt of the litter when it came to radio stations in New York. They just had a 3,000 watt signal. At a time when the larger stations in New York, WNEW, WPLJ, and WAPP, all had 50,000 watt signals. But while those larger rock stations were playing the same 10 to 20 rock songs, WLIR blazed a new trail. They were the first station to play Yazoo, Erasure, Squeeze, Talk Talk, Howard Jones. They were the first station to play Roxanne by the Police. Oh, you're not impressed by English new wave bands? How about this? They were the first to play Madonna. They were the first to play Prince. Disclaimer, first rock format station to play Prince. They launched U2, Adam Ant, Depeche Mode, A Flock of Seagulls, Tears for Fears, the Thompson Twins. So please come back in time with me as I pay tribute to the best station of the 1980s, WLIR. Dare to be different? I want to take a moment just to thank my patrons. I love you guys. If you're a fan of the show and you're enjoying the bands I'm bringing you, please think about joining my Patreon. It's at patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. On with the show. So the main reason that WLIR is so fondly remembered today is because of one man, Dennis McNamara. He was the brilliant program director who decided on August 2nd, 1981, to change formats and introduce new music. Not specifically new wave, but just new music, an umbrella title for all of the different movements that were happening, mostly in England, before they got here. He really embraced what was happening in Britain. So much so that one of the DJs, Larry the Duck, aka Larry Dunn, hosted a show called Off the Boat, which was a show that played imports. People from the station would literally go to the airport and meet the plane coming back from Britain with the imports. That's how fresh these records were. Record executives had ideas about when they were going to release records and when they would be available in the stores and when that artist was going to tour, and they wanted the release of the record to peak with that. WLIR said, fuck that shit. And they went and bought records and just played them. And then the executives had to scramble and get some of those in the stores because people were all hopped up to hear it. They changed the game. WLIR broke so many English bands in this country that British executives started to call WLIR the gateway to America. In that short period after disco, but before 80s pop, WLIR identified the audience for MTV before MTV existed. The station had a great collection of DJs. Along with Larry the Duck, there was Donna Donna, Malibu Sue, Barry Ravioli, John DeBella, Bob Maroney, Bob Wah, and they all played music that they liked. And they liked different things. That's what was great about WLIR. The radio station even had a show, Punky Reggae Party, on Sunday nights, hosted by Michael Epstein, who was the owner of my father's place, this storied rock club out on Long Island. He'd play things like The Specials, The Clash, UB40, The English Beat, and even Musical Youth. Pastor Dutchie eventually blew up and took over the country, but it was only because he played it first. Give me music, make me jump and prance. Give me music, make me rock in the dance. It's all go done. My favorite aspect of WLIR was the Screamer of the Week. The DJs would identify 5 new songs every single week, and all us listeners could call in to vote. Every Thursday was Screamer Day, and at 10 p.m. Thursday night, the winner would be announced, and that winning song would go into heavy rotation for the following week. How successful was the Screamer of the Week as far as projecting popularity? Well, Seymour Stein, owner of Sire Records, said that Sire Records would choose its next single based on who won Screamer of the Week. Now the Screamers varied wildly. Everything from She's Crafty by the Beastie Boys to Don't Worry Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin. Another Screamer of the Week was Electric Avenue by Eddie Grant. WLIR was the first station to play that song. Now all of the Screamers weren't winners. The first week in June of 1983, the Screamer of the Week was Theme from Dr. Detroit. But if anything, this just proves that the voting was not rigged. The listeners were in charge and had a sense of humor. I'm going to be compiling a YouTube playlist of all songs that I fell in love with on WLIR. Check the right of your screen. If you see songs over there, don't do a thing. The music is going to play right after this. If you don't see songs over there, don't worry. There'll be a link in the descriptions to the playlist. If this video starts to play again, just click forward and you'll go to the first song. I did the same thing for my Halloween episode last year with my spooky playlist, which you can check out up here. So what I want to do is just bring you some of the music that I was first introduced to by WLIR. Christine by Susie and the Banshees. I couldn't believe my ears. It sounded like candy. Christine the Strawberry Girl. Christine Banana Split Lady. And the whole damn song just sounded so sweet that I ran to get a cassette and I popped it in. And for another month, I enjoyed 3/4 of the song. A good radio station in the 80s would always force you to have a cassette queued up just in case, so that if a song you loved started playing, you could hit record. This album came out in 1980, but it was in regular rotation on WLIR all throughout the early 80s, and I absolutely loved it. Later I would get the singles collection, and then finally the album. I became a rabid Susie and the Banshees fan, eventually seeing them in 1988 on the Peekaboo Tour, one of the greatest concerts I've ever been to. But it all started with Christine from WLIR. Love is the Law, The Suburbs. This was another one that I had to pop in the cassette for. This is their debut album. These guys were on Twin Tone. They were the first band to get signed to the Twin Tone label, much to the consternation of other sloppier bands. I had the pleasure of interviewing Peter Jesperson, one of the founders of the Twin Tone label and the man who discovered the Replacements. And he said to me the Suburbs were the band that were the most ready to record out of all of the Twin Tone bands. This whole album is good, but the title track, Love is the Law, I love. I was even surprised I liked it at the time. I don't usually like horns with rock bands, but they have such a good sound. But I think what I like the most about Love is the Law is the vocal performance by Chan Polling. It's a kind of subdued, detached vocal that I really love. And the best of new wave music was music you could dance to. And this is that. Love is the Law. Looking for Lewis and Clark, The Long Riders. This is another stellar vocal performance. I love Looking for Lewis and Clark. It is a real garage rock stomper. These guys were on that roots rock revival scene that happened in the early 80s. And Looking for Lewis and Clark is one of the best songs from it. Great, great guitar-driven track. Gun Law by the Kane Gang. I first heard this on WLIR, fell in love with it. 1985, my family goes to Ireland, and I bought this at Golden Discs for 50p, which in today's money I believe is $2,000. Might be off by a couple of bucks. But I fell in love with this song. Later, I got the 12-inch version. Later still, I got the remix version. Vinyl enthusiasts, I'm sure you feel my pain. Sometimes nostalgia grabs the wheel, if you know what I'm talking about. And it's hard to pass things up. But anyway, this single is the best introduction to the Kane Gang. The lyrics go, when my dreams are at the end of a rope, and you've drowned out my voice, when you've robbed me of all hope, and said you had no choice. Gun Law, here it comes. Again, I think it's the vocal performance that I fell in love with more than anything else. Martin Brammer was the vocalist, but the whole damn song is great. Kane Gang continued making music. They were a great little band, but I really think your introduction should be Gun Law. Strawberry Switchblade, Let Her Go. I said earlier that WLIR identified the MTV audience before MTV was a thing. Talk about tailor-made for MTV. Two gorgeous, gorgeous women who have very unique style. If you put Susie Sue and Nina Hagen in a blender, you kind of get this style. These two Scottish beauties are Jill Bryson and Rose McDowell. If you've heard of them already, it's probably for their song Since Yesterday, which came out the same year as this, 1985. But for me, my introduction to them, Let Her Go, is still my favorite track by them. 68 Guns by The Alarm. Mike Peters was the lead singer, and he delivers blistering vocal performance. The Alarm had very anthemic, spacious, epic songs, and 68 Guns was no different. The funny thing is, when I tracked down this song again later in life, it's a slower song than I remembered, but I fell in love with it again. But it's all about the chorus for 68 Guns. So be sure to check that out. I also love their album, The Stand. I saw them live in '85 while I was in Ireland. Great band live. Echo Beach, Martha and the Muffins. One of the greatest new wave songs ever. Usually you have a great song driven by guitar, or by keyboards, or by sax. Very rarely do those three all share space in the DNA of a song and not crowd each other, but somehow they do for Echo Beach. You can think of Martha and the Muffins as almost the 80s pop equivalent of X-Ray Spex. Very similar instrumentation, sardonic vocals, and very danceable. This entire album is killer. Incidentally, the Martha in Martha and the Muffins were two women, Martha Johnson on keyboards and vocals, and Martha Ladley on keyboards, vocals, and trombone. Please hunt down their debut, Metro Music. Echo Beach is just the tip of the iceberg for this great band. New Toy by Lena Lovitch. Lena Lovitch is a bit different from other musicians. She's sort of touched by madness in the most wonderful way musically, and New Toy is just a killer, killer song. It has fantastic 80s production that has not aged one bit. It's a dance floor favorite. Lena's best album is Stateless on Stiff Records. It has Lucky Number on it, which you probably know, but other songs like Home are great on it. She is a really underrated artist. But for me, it all started with New Toy, and I absolutely love it. Up next, The Screaming Tribesmen, Date with a Vampire. This was the Screamer of the Week for the first week of September 1985. This was one of the most fun Screamers of the Week. The lyrics are killer. She dresses up in black and wears a red rose in her hair. I know she is a demon, but somehow I just don't care. I've got a date with a vampire girl tonight. And wait till you hear the production on it. The intro alone will grab you. Super, super fun. You want to hear how wild the Screamers went from week to week? The Screamer of the Week for the week following the Screaming Tribesmen, Date with a Vampire, was Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill. How's that for variety? I Melt With You, Modern English. In America, this band was put out on Sire. Good old Seymour Stein, he always knew talent when he saw it. Was playing constantly, all the time. At any house I would go over to, or in any car I would ride in. I thought it was the biggest song on the planet. Their album Mesh and Lace is fantastic, but I Melt With You is their all-time classic. And it's the kind of song where even if you get tired of it for a little while, it never really gets played out. Again, it's the vocals for me. Robbie Gray's vocals totally make this song. You already know it probably by now, but it's definitely in my mix because it was such a staple on WLIR. Up next, Big Decision by That Petrol Emotion. This band featured the O'Neill brothers, Sean and Damien, who both played guitar in the Undertones, and this is a great 80s album. They had other great albums. I really like Chemicrazy. This has a song, Hey Venus, which I really like, but the 80s production is kind of balls to the wall on this one. But with Babel, it really works. And the album version of Big Decision is the extended version, as opposed to the single version, which was shorter. So check this out, I really think you'll enjoy it. Up next, Howard Jones, Dream Into Action, this entire album. I can't pick a song, because so many of these songs on this album were played ad nauseum on LIR, and I never got tired of them. Things Can Only Get Better, Life in One Day, No One Is to Blame, Like to Get to Know You Well, my personal favorite off this album. WLIR broke Howard Jones in America. They brought him to the masses, and it was only after they started playing him that other stations came to bat for him and put him in the rotation. He was a big star in the 80s, and this is his best album. Humans Live is also great, but this album has a special place in my heart. So check out Like to Get to Know You Well. Oblivious by Aztec Camera. Roddy Frame was the leader of Aztec Camera, and Oblivious, to me, is their greatest song. Even if you think you don't know it, you might just know it. Here are the lyrics. I hear your footsteps in the street. It won't be long before we meet. It's obvious. Just count me in and count me out. I'll be waiting for the shout. Oblivious. Great track with fantastic production. Alone Without You by King. He had singles played on WLIR previous to this. Love and Pride was a great one, which I really enjoy, and I have. But for me, Alone Without You is his best song, and it's on this album, Bittersweet. Alone Without You has a sort of acid tongue delivery that is missing from the other, more uplifting tracks. It's a great song to sing along to, and I think you'll really love it. Blasphemous Rumors by Depeche Mode. It's hard to explain just how much that song affected me as a 13, 14-year-old boy, but it did affect me. It is a mind-bender of a track. Girl of 16, whole life ahead of her, slashed her wrists, bored with life, didn't succeed, thank the Lord for small mercies. Come on! I didn't know you could write lyrics like that. This is a brilliant album, but Blasphemous Rumors to me will always be special for nostalgic reasons. It's the song that got me into Depeche Mode. Love Cats by The Cure. The Cure was one of the big bands that WLIR broke. Along with New Order, Squeeze, U2, The Cure was championed early and often by WLIR. This is another song that I taped on cassette off the radio because I fell in love with it. It's a little different from other Cure songs, but it's different in a great way. It's bouncy, it's dancey, but it's sweet and it's tender and it's fun. So much so that my wife and I danced to this song at our wedding. We dared to be different. Love Cats to this day, probably my favorite Cure song. Whisper to a Scream, aka Birds Fly by Icicle Works. I'm not familiar with a lot of Icicle Works works, but this album is really great, and Whisper to a Scream is their greatest composition. They're a Beggars Banquet band who were put out on Arista in America, and I first fell in love with Whisper to a Scream on WLIR. Up next, Intaferon, Get Out of London. I loved this track as a kid. Could not get enough of it. It's got a rap style from this British guy. The lyrics are just plain fun. Making coffins out of bits of old wood. Sell them cheap to the council, though I know it's not good. To be a traitor, collaborator, still I'd rather be a snitch than a cocktail waiter. Commit my crime now, pay my penalty later. So much fun. Check out Intaferon, Get Out of London. I'm going to put a link to the video below because it's a fun video from a fun little short-lived band. And finally, just because I have to end somewhere, Shoot You Down, APB. This whole album is awesome because the first album is nothing more than a collection of their great singles, all of which were played on WLIR at some point or another. One Day, Rainy Day, My Beloved Palace Filled with Love, but Shoot You Down was my introduction to APB. And as introductions go, it's a killer. It is the funkiest, most badass throwdown of a track in their entire canon. This is a great Scottish band who actually went out on tour opening for James Brown. And when you hear Shoot Me Down, you'll be like, all right, I get it. They could tour with James Brown. The lead singer, Ian Slater, on bass and vocals, is a fantastic bass player. Super funky, and he's a great vocalist, almost in the plain-spoken Ray Davies style. Track down this album. You will be blown away by how great it is. And Shoot You Down should be your entry point to this great Scottish five-piece. That is it. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please hit the like button and be sure to subscribe. And I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.